Welcome back to another episode of the How to Home podcast. My name's Aaron Massey and joined as always by Tracy Pendergast.
Hello.
And our guest today is calling in from Washington State, Kumiko Love, the budget mom. She's going to be joining us today to talk about setting a family budget and how to stick with it and some of the pitfalls that a lot of people fall into. And before we dive too much into this, I just want to take a quick second and say thank you to our founding sponsor, FilterBuy, for making this series and this episode possible. FilterBuy is an HVAC filter provider. They can manufacture and ship over 600 different size filters for your units. They come on whatever schedule you want, and you can save 5% when you subscribe. So thank you very much to FilterBuy for making this series possible. And we also want to encourage you guys to get involved in the show. Make sure you're following us on social media. You can find us on Instagram at howtohome_guide. And you can always visit our website and sign up on our email list so you never miss out on any upcoming content. So thank you very much for joining us, Kumiko.
Thank you for having me.
Why don't you give us a little bit of a background on what it is that you do as the budget mom?
So as a budget mom, I really inspire people to live on a budget that they can afford and understand. And it really has to do with learning those psychological and emotions behind our spending decisions and money management in our personal lives. And that's really why I created the Budget Mom. It's not really, yes, there's a lot of information on how to budget, but I really wanted to do like behind the scenes on what it really looks like in someone's real life to live on a successful budget. And so that's what the Budget Mom is all about.
I've done a family budget and I've done some stuff, but I can always do the budget. It's the sticking to the budget and actually following it that's the hard part.
Yes. Yeah. So that's why really I like to show behind the scenes, because sticking to a budget, creating a budget is actually very easy. You write numbers down on a piece of paper. It's really learning to understand your spending triggers and how and why you make the money choices that you do. That really, once you have that and understand that, then sticking to it becomes a lot easier, because now you understand the underlying cause of why you may not stick to budget, or why you're spending the money you're spending, or why it's not working. And so that's why that real life for me is really important.
So if we just start at the very beginning, what is, in a nutshell, your budgeting philosophy? I know you do the envelope method. Can you tell everyone a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I follow what's called the budget by paycheck method. And for a long time, I was like a lot of my readers, I tried to squeeze myself into this box of monthly budgeting, and my mind just does not work that way. I was paying my bills when I got paid, but I was still trying to budget my money monthly. And for me, that was a really hard process. And that's essentially why I was failing with my budget. So I started listening to what worked for me, and that was budgeting my money every single time I'm paid. That means paying certain expenses with each paycheck, even down to my variable spending like gas and clothes would be broken down based on my paychecks. And my budgeting method, it kind of incorporates a bunch of different methods in one. So it's the calendar method, it's the cash envelope method, and it's the paycheck method, all rolled into like a step-by-step process that really becomes easy to follow once you understand those steps.
So you just hit on exactly why your method appeals to me, and Aaron's probably the same way. So we're freelance. My husband's freelance. So all of our paychecks are never the same. So right. If you budget by paycheck, and are you working on a percentage system?
So here's that thing that's really weird and kind of out of the scope of what a lot of people do is I don't use dollar amounts, like predetermined dollar amounts or percentages with my budget.
Okay.
So I don't say to my readers, you have to save 10% of your income, or you should save $1,000 for your emergency fund. I think it's really important for people to know that it's up to you and your comfort levels and ultimately being at peace with your money decisions and having that confidence in the decisions you're making, because without it, we really won't stick to it, right? If we're not feeling at peace and confident and we're not seeing signs of success, what we know as signs of success personally, then it's just not going to work. And so when you're like a freelance and your paychecks are different, I really do tell my readers that's a matter of, this is when knowing everything about your dollars is so important. It's about going to past months, looking at what did I make the last 3 months? There's your estimate. There's your baseline. And then a matter of using estimates and working around those estimates when you're doing your budget, especially if you're like, you get paid tips, you're a hairdresser, you're self-employed, you're freelancer. Knowing and going back and analyzing what you've made in the past makes a huge difference.
So what's your background? Did you go to college for financial planning? Where did all this come about? How did you figure this out?
So I actually went to school and graduated with a finance and accounting degree. I'm a double major and I minored in economics. It's kind of the stuff that really interested me. And then as soon as I graduated with my finance degree, I started working at a financial firm. And it was there that I studied to be an investment advisor, as well as accredited financial counselor. And so that's my kind of background. And working in the financial industry on a financial advisor level really kind of gives me a whole range of knowledge, because not only is it the investment and portfolio and planning side, but it's also the counseling side. And that's what really piqued my interest, that emotions behind our spending, that psychological triggers that a lot of people don't talk about when it comes to budgeting.
And what do you think those common triggers are for most people?
I think it's different for everybody. For me, it had to do with, going through college and even throughout high school, I was dealing with a lot of self-confidence issues, not really being in love with who I was. And I also had an issue where I would compare myself to others. I would want what they wanted. I wanted to wear what they wanted, even though I couldn't afford it in my life at that moment. And not loving myself made me go out and spend money on things that made me feel better for a while until I wasn't feeling good. And then I would go back out and spend. And it seems like it's a really easy answer to figure out. But for me, it took many years to understand those spending triggers. And so when my readers are spending money and they're spending knowing in their gut they can't afford to make those spending decisions, I ask them to take 30 seconds before they buy or purchase to really ask themselves, why am I spending this money? Do I need it? Is it, and so that's, for me, I had to ask myself that every day on every spending decision for many years until I had to admit to myself, I don't love myself. And it's waking up every morning and say, you are enough. And, and I had a lot of support from family that kind of helped me, figure those things out. But I really think it comes down to asking yourself those hard questions that a lot of people just aren't asking.
Yeah, I think social media probably plays a huge role in that, especially, I follow a bunch of home accounts and designers and decorators. It's what inspires me, but sometimes it can make me feel a little bit like, wow, I really don't have it together. I need to start doing these things. And I think being mindful is so important. And I love that you're speaking about that, because a lot of people might look at you and say, wow, she's got it all together. Like, she's confident, and you do have it all together. But I think we all feel these things and these voids that we want to fill. And that's really brave and amazing of you to touch on.
Yeah, social media definitely plays a huge role, especially now with the way that social media is. So for me, for instance, I'm saving up to buy my first home with cash. And I do the same thing. I follow a bunch of home accounts, right, with these beautiful homes and large kitchens and everything that I want in a dream home. And here I am sitting in an 800 square foot apartment that was built in 1975 with, appliances that were made from the 1980s. And I think to myself, God, I want that so bad for myself. But it's a matter of learning to be okay with your surroundings and what you have, and just being really humble and saying, I'm blessed for what I have. And I know why I'm here. And that's because I have bigger goals and plans for myself. And so I just have to keep my mind on that.
That's amazing. Which monthly expenses do you think every homeowner can cut back on? Where do you see money kind of getting sucked in that's unnecessary?
Definitely food spending. So your food budget, and I've heard this for, it's one of those budget killers. It's silent and it's deadly, but it's there and it's a necessity, right? And I think one of the things when I first started, and this all has come down to tracking your spending. Once you start tracking your dollars, you'll start noticing right away. My readers call it a slap in the face moment. It's like, oh my gosh, I just spent $150 this month going to the coffee shop.
It's so bad.
It's
Guilty.
like I could spend that on, $150. That's a debt payment right there. That's extra savings for my vacation next year. But definitely food costs, as well as variable spending like house purchases. So I have a household category in my envelope. It's meant for like toilet paper, cleaning supplies. But then comes like all the pretty decoration type stuff and all the things that, your mind, when you're shopping the clearance aisles at Target, right? All the things were like, oh, that's a household purchase. So I think household purchases as well, like home decoration goods, but definitely your food budget. That is the number one thing that I think everybody out there can actually really decrease in a realistic way. And then as well as, it's going to sound weird, your regular expenses. So I'm talking about like your water and utility bill. A lot of people think, well, it just is what it is. I can't have it reduced. But there are actually a lot of programs out there where it can become more affordable for you. So I think it's a matter of going line by line of your regular household expenses and start doing the investigative work, making phone calls to see if you can get your bills decreased, because a lot of the time there's options out there people don't know about.
And with food, are you really encouraging meal planning and preparation?
Yes. Meal planning is definitely what changed my food budget for me, and planning out meals and recipes based on what I have at home already. So I teach my readers how to do an inventory check every single month in the beginning of the month before they start creating their meal plans. And it really does help decrease those grocery runs and the cost of doing grocery runs. But not only that, it makes you more aware of what you can use at home rather than waiting for it to expire and then throwing it out because you found it in the back of your freezer 5 months later.
That's me too.
Yeah.
I'm like hearing all these things and I'm like, you're taking away all the things I enjoy, like the spontaneity of my meal planning, like my coffee run. Like, I don't want to plan meals. Like, want somebody else to do it for me. That's like my biggest thing is like, eating out and coffee runs. Always blow the budget with that. And then working on the house, obviously. My house is like a fixer-upper, so it's like I start a project and then it's like, oh, well, I'm doing this, I might as well spend that, and I got to do this and this and this and this, and then it kind of snowballs. We've talked about that before.
Yeah. Can you be a well-budgeted person and still live a life with spontaneity?
Oh, absolutely, yes. So this is something I'm kind of talking to my readers right now. It's all about, we were just talking about guilt and the guilt you get when you spend money, especially on spontaneous purchases or purchasing for yourself. It can definitely be done, but you need to have a plan for it. So, and rather than just, oh, I'm going to go out to dinner tonight and I'm going to use my clothing envelope or my clothing money because I didn't have a plan for it. No, if you want to have spontaneous purchase or spend on yourself, create an allowance for yourself, $100 a month. Or for me, I have a fun category. And with my 6-year-old, things come up out of the blue all the time. It's like, he's like, Mom, I want to go to the park and get ice cream. This is why I started budgeting in the first place. My son, and being able to pick up opportunities and experiences with him without constantly worrying about money. And so I have a fun category. It's $100 every month. That allows me to not only be spontaneous, but spend on things that used to make me feel guilty, but don't now because I have a plan for it. So I definitely think planning out every dollar of your income helps a lot.
So it's funny because I actually never feel guilty spending on my kids. It's pretty much all I spend on is my home, food, and my kids. But I find my husband and I haven't spent any money on ourselves in probably like 4 years, just like indulgent, something I just want for me.
Date nights.
Yeah, just I don't know. So I actually feel like some freedom would come for parents with knowing that they have liberty to spend a little money on themselves too.
Exactly. And here's the thing, even at 33 years old, I have lost a lot of people in my life. And out of that tragedy, one of the things that I've learned is life is short. And people are starting their budgeting and financial journeys for a reason. Never forget why you started. And in the process, it's really important not to lose yourself along the way. What makes us happy, because even as moms, as selfless as we are, and as many times as we put our children's needs and wants before our own, we're still people. And especially when it comes to marriages and partnerships, it's really important to have that time and to dedicate a little money for ourselves, because that's what makes it worth it. And for me, I think we get so caught up in spending only for our children, or only, saving for our financial goals, or only paying off debt. And that's how a lot of people become depressed on their financial journeys and feeling like, what am I doing this for? I'm not having any fun with it. I'm not getting any pleasure out of it because I'm here serving everyone else but myself. And so you do have to be a little bit selfish in a way, and remember that you're a person too, and you matter as well.
Since we just touched on the parenting thing a little bit, what inspired you to really focus on women and mothers, empowering us?
It kind of just happened organically, because here I was a single divorced mom, and I was struggling with my finances. And there are times where I would literally, I'm dealing with my first child. I had no idea what I was doing as a mom. There are nights where I'd be crying in the corner, literally listening to my son scream because I had no idea what I was doing. On top of that, wondering and worrying about how I was going to pay my next month bills or put food on the table. And those feelings they're not just scary, but they're very overwhelming. And so I wanted to find a tribe, someone that I could talk to as an outlet. And so as I started searching for that tribe, they found me as well. And so it was like I was searching for them, and then they were searching for me. And that's why the community, the TBM community, is so wonderful, is because we were both looking for each other and we found it. And I think that's why I have the relationship I do with my readers.
And you actually put your savings balance on your Instagram for people to watch. What made you choose to do that?
Yes. And so I really think, and that comes down to showing people what it really looks like in real life to budget on a successful budget. That's why I share my real numbers. I share my real numbers, debt, budgeting, savings, because I think that it makes it more relatable. If someone can see that someone out there is really doing it, not just giving examples, not just throwing you fake numbers, but it's really happening in someone's life, then they can say to themselves, you know what? I can do it too. Even though my numbers may be different, I can see her thought process, her mindset, why she's making the decisions she's making, and I can start doing that as well.
Talking about the home, like what are the major categories that people should be, allotting, budgeting for? Like, do you recommend, having an emergency fund, or like, how do you plan for all that type of stuff?
Definitely. So as a homeowner, now I'm not a homeowner, but I definitely know what I would include in my budget if I did have a house. One of those, yes, is your emergency fund. An emergency fund is number one, doesn't matter where you are in your life. If you're renting an apartment, if you're paying off debt, if you have savings goal, or you own a home, emergency fund is so important, because let's not forget, a debt-free journey or a savings journey is not just about making debt payments or putting savings into our savings accounts. It's about managing our money so we set ourselves up to succeed in the future. And we can't do that if unexpected expenses keep coming up and it's taking away from our financial goals. So emergency fund is really important, but also a maintenance fund. If you are a homeowner, having a maintenance fund is also very important. Now, what's the difference between emergency and, say, a maintenance cost? So maintenance cost would be, in 5 years, you're going to need a new roof. Okay, that allows you to start every single month. You save what you can, a little bit of money to reach that goal within 5 years. Emergency is pipe burst, my basement is flooding now. Okay, it's something we don't really have control over or any time to prepare. But maintenance cost is something where we can prepare knowing our home and what needs to be fixed or upgrades or remodels that we need to do. So emergency funds and maintenance costs, not only that, I'll be buying my first home with cash, and a lot of people think, well, that's great because you're not going to have any home expenses. But that's not true. You have to think about property taxes. So I do tell people, if your property taxes aren't included in your mortgage, like in my circumstance, I won't have a mortgage, but I'll owe those property taxes. I would create a sinking fund, a savings account where you save a little every single month to pay that full amount when the bill comes due.
I mean, that makes total sense. And I totally agree about the emergency fund and the maintenance cost, because and it depends on the house you have, right? Because if you buy a fixer-upper, like in my case, you kind of know in advance that your maintenance fund is going to have to be a certain level of,
yes.
I feel like your maintenance fund and your fund money envelope are like the same envelope.
Same. Yeah, you mix and match.
You sick
yeah,
human.
I'm a sadistic person.
Oh, man. Okay, so I'm really bad at math. I'm really bad with numbers. I totally admit it. The fact that I actually run a business is really, I don't know how. But so for someone like me, can anyone do this system? What's kind of what do you do?
Okay, so here's the thing. I'm a finance expert and I worked in the financial industry for a very, very long time. I am calculator dependent. I am also not good with math and numbers.
Okay.
And I'm here succeeding at it. But the real truth is doing all the budgeting and finance work, it's really not complicated math. It's, addition, subtraction, but that's what we have calculators for. And I couldn't do it without my calculator. Now, I'm the type of person that's like 8 plus 8 on my calculator.
Same.
And I'm not afraid to admit it, because let's face it, a lot of people out there aren't numbers people. But I am a numbers person when it comes to analyzing numbers. I like seeing patterns and I like watching progression as it happens. And that's where I get really excited about numbers. But as far as the day-to-day maintenance of a budget, absolutely not. Anybody can do this. Anyone is, just get out a calculator in front of you and plug at it.
Okay. Now, in terms of retirement, savings, college accounts, these large looming concepts, what should every single person have in place that most people don't? Most people probably including me and my husband.
Yeah, so I definitely think when it comes to retirement, especially with us being self-employed, it really is up to us to make sure that's in place, right? We don't have an employer who's doing it for us. But I also think it's really important that once you get to that step in your financial journey of knowing, hey, I want to tackle retirement, and it's something that I encourage everyone to start as early as possible, finding a financial advisor that you can trust. I am really big on, if you don't possess the skills necessary to make those decisions wisely, you need to lean on someone that has them. And even for me, I still have a financial advisor. And I think it really helps me solidify the thoughts that I'm already making and having. So I don't know if I answered your question. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. So should everyone have checking, savings, and then a retirement fund, do you recommend?
Yeah. So I really think, checking, savings. Now, here's the thing with savings. For me personally, I am the type of person where I feel like I'm more motivated to save if each of my savings accounts are separated and labeled for that specific goal.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, if you're just setting money and I ask you, what are you saving for? And you tell me, oh, just a rainy day or just because, all of a sudden those dollars that you're saving don't have a true purpose. And that's where you lose the motivation to keep saving. But if you're saving and you make it specific, like I'm saving for a vacation to Disneyland with my son. Rainy day, vacation with son. Do you see how much more important it becomes?
Absolutely.
Yes. And like I said, it has to do with those small psychological things that we change. One small change can really affect your motivation and dedication to what you're doing. So it's checking your savings accounts, your retirement funds, and for business owners, always, always, always keep your checking and savings separate from your personal checking and savings. For me, I like to tell people, if you are a business owner out there making income, right now you should have a checking and savings account that is separate from your day-to-day personal life.
I have a lot of work to do. No, I have the business, the checking, the savings, but it's when you put it that way, you're so right, because when I dip into like our savings, I don't really feel any type of
remorse.
Yeah. I mean, I just think like, well, this is what it's here for. But if it's there for something specific, then no, like dipping into it for something else doesn't make me feel as okay.
Right. Especially like the example with the vacation, like I have a savings account to take my son to Disneyland in February. If I were to even think about pulling that, the guilt of being a mom saying, I'm pulling money away, that a trip I promised my son.
Yeah.
And so that really encourages me not to spend it, but it goes down for breaking it down specifically for any savings goal. You start to ask yourself those questions. Do I really need to spend this because it's meant for something else?
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about these things in so many different ways on the show. So like, composting was one thing we talked about. It's an idea that seems so big and so overwhelming, but they recommended after every meal, starting to get into the habit of just putting food in a bowl on the counter and then eventually moving the bowl to the bin and just creating habits. And I think this is about rewiring your brain and creating really positive habits. And I mean, do you ever have moments where have you had any major setbacks on this journey? Like since you've publicly started sharing?
Oh, yes. Major setbacks. So one of the things that kind of I struggled with was when my business actually started making money. So I started with a bad habit of using my business checking account for personal spending. I would tell myself, oh, I have the money. I'm going to go to dinner to Red Robin. It's in my business checking account. Swipe my business checking account card. Just go at it. And I found myself more and more as the months went on, dipping into my business money for personal reasons. And I think that nipping that habit in the bud from the very beginning is what needs to happen, because you don't want to start those bad habits and then have it be really hard to break later on, because that is an extremely hard habit to break, as I learned. But yes, another thing is lifestyle inflation. So as my income has increased, learning to live off my existing budget and use that extra income to funnel into my financial goals. But it's really hard because you start telling yourself, well, I'm making all this extra money, I deserve to go out and get this stuff for myself. But it comes down to, well, I really don't need it. It's just something that I'm feeling right now. And so that a lifestyle inflation is also a setback that I kind of had to deal with. But those are the two only real things. And of course, there's always things that come up with my son. One of the things the setbacks that I kind of experienced in the beginning of my journey was learning to say no to my son. As a divorced mom, I had a lot of guilt and I put a lot of blame on the divorce and how it affected my son on myself. And so for a period of time there, I told myself, I just want my son to be happy, right? I just want him to feel joy because I just put him through this traumatic experience of a divorce. And so anytime we went to the store, he said, Mom, can I pick out a new toy? Absolutely, I would say. And it took a while, that setback of spending a lot of money on those decisions and it involved a whole bunch of things, guilt as a mom and of course other things, but that was a setback, and it's something that I had to correct as I went along, and learning to say, it's okay to say no to my son. I know that sounds really weird, and some people are like, well, any good mom wouldn't go through that. Like you have to know to say no to your son. And for me, it was kind of the opposite. It's something that I struggle with. And so that was another setback that I experienced.
I love your honesty on that because my children have not gone through a divorce and I struggle with that. You know, even at Target, there's like the dollar bins and we've gotten into the habit of like, okay, if we're good for this shopping trip, we can swing through and we can grab like something from the dollar bin. And in my head, it's $1 to $3 and it's no big deal. But now there's an expectation that anytime they're good at a store, they get a reward and that reward is purchased. And I've had to work to reverse that because that was my own doing. And I think most moms feel guilt and, well, parents feel guilt in some way or another. And it's hard saying no. And sometimes it's easier just saying yes.
It's so hard to explain that to people who don't have kids where they're like, you should just be able to say no. It is so hard.
I know.
And so, the way I kind of corrected it was I told my son, well, if you want a new toy, you bring your piggy bank. You saved up for the money to buy what you want, but if you use it, then you can't use it on the new laptop that you're saving for. And so it's kind of working on teaching my son those money management habits as well at an early age, using his own type of savings. And I was able to correct my problems as well. So it was a win-win.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So we talked a little bit about some of your like personal issues that you came across. What about your audience? Like, what are some of the common traps or pitfalls that you see people kind of falling into that are inhibiting their financial goals? So
one of the things that I feel like a lot of my readers struggle with is they'll say to me, Miko, I feel like I don't have enough income at the end of the month after paying my bills for my financial goals. And so because they believe this, and it's the mindset they have, right? It's really hard for them to change that and say, wait a minute, I really do have more income than what I thought. And it allows them to start going through what they already have, their expenses that they already have, and finding dollars they didn't know they had. So that's one of the things, that mindset of, here I am, I'm stuck here, right? They feel like they can't do anything to get themselves out of it. Another big thing that my readers struggle with is their food budget. I get it all the time, which is why meal planning and showing that to my readers is so important in what I do. And I try to show a little bit every day. I could do better, but I'm trying to show more of the meal planning. Another thing is debt. Miko, I have all this debt. I don't even know where to start. In fact, I'm so scared to look at it. I don't even want to start, but I know I need to. And debt is something, because I was on a debt-free journey for the longest time, a lot of people have come to me with debt type questions just because, I paid off, it was about over $77,000 in 8 months. But crazy. Debt is definitely another thing that readers, and knowing where to start and feeling the confidence and seeing the hope, really discovering the hope to start, I think is another big issue with my readers.
Well, the credit card debt is so hard because, yes, you can keep paying the minimum payment every single month, but it just feels like it never goes away. So how do you help people that are working with like a limited budget start making any sort of making progress on those big bills?
So one of the things that I tell my readers, the number one thing I tell my readers who are in debt is to start tracking your spending. I don't care about anything else that you're doing. You need to be aware of where your dollars are going so you can start making changes to cut spending. Because really, all in all, if you want to make bigger debt payments, you have two options. You can increase your income, or you can work with what you have now, and that's decreasing your spending. And as a business owner and single mom, I always don't like telling my readers, go out and get a second job, because that means less time with your family. And let's face it, time is something that we can't get back. You can always earn more money, but you can't get time back with your children. And so I always tell people to start with tracking your spending and cutting the costs, because boy, it's amazing when people do this and they find an extra $500 a month to put towards debt. I mean, I've seen it all the way up into the thousands. And that's money that people didn't know that they had with their already existing income. That's strictly from just cutting down spending. And so that's really where I tell people to start. And once you start that, then it's about starting that debt payoff plan and organizing your debt in a way to management, step by step to get it paid off.
I can't tell you how many times I've packed my kids' lunch and then we still buy food. Like, I am prepared and then I'm still weak. Like, it's so annoying. And I am going to start thinking about every single purchase now and really, I don't know, you've inspired me to be more honest with myself and be stricter, because food is hard. And it's little treats and little coffees, and it adds up.
And even to this day, if you're on my Instagram, I share a daily video every day. I post every day. You'll see even me, I still struggle with it. And my big thing is, like, when I get gas, going into the gas station to get Diet Coke.
Oh yeah.
I am horrible at it. And the great thing about the Budget Mom community is that's where accountability comes into play, right? I tell myself, if I go to McDonald's and buy a Big Mac, all 180,000 followers are going to know I went and got a Big Mac. And so it's that accountability. But at the same time, there is one question that I ask myself before I make those impulse purchases. And that is, if I spend the money right now, what am I giving up in the future to get this? And then all of a sudden, it's like your why and the reason you're doing what you're doing with your budgeting journey. For me, I get emotional over it, because the reason I'm on my budgeting journey is for financial freedom and to provide a better life for my child. Diet Coke or working towards that. And so it really puts things into perspective for me. That one question has literally changed everything with my finances.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. You can just kind of weigh your purchases and try and eliminate those impulse buys, I guess, that we're all so guilty of doing. I know I'm always doing that,
And
every
convenience, like planning ahead and
Yes.
So how often do you sit down and go over all of your numbers, just like when you get every paycheck, or kind of how does your monthly system look?
So currently right now, for over 9 years, I got paid twice a month. So I was budgeting twice a month. Now that I'm self-employed and working for my business full time, it's once a month. So I sit down and create my budget about 5 days before I get my paycheck. But I spend 15 minutes every morning and every night going over my bank account, the transactions, as well as tracking my spending. Now, I do everything manually. In fact, I've found on my financial journey that using electronic programs or apps like YNAB or Mint, they didn't really work for me, because some of the biggest aha moments that I had in my journey was because I was putting pen to paper. Mm-hmm. It has to do with those psychological benefits of writing things down, and I am a huge believer in it. And so I spend about 15 minutes every morning, every night, writing out my expenses, going through the receipts that I save. Now, I am an all-cash spender, which means I never swipe my debit card, ever.
That's crazy. Like, I never carry cash.
I could probably cut my debit card up today if it wasn't for the fact that I need to do online shopping. Like, seriously, I never do it. So I save my receipts throughout the day for my spending, and I track that on my cash envelope, and it tells me right now, today, at this moment, this is how much I have to spend on this category. All of a sudden, your magical numbers that you wrote down on a piece of paper become tangible, right? This is what makes your budget tangible and realistic. Seeing that cash in front of you, oh my gosh, it's a game changer. It really makes you start asking those really important questions with your spending. Like, I have $20 left in my food envelope. My son is asking for, a pack of Mountain Dew. I only have $20 left. Is it the Mountain Dew or is it food for the week? So it's just, it's almost like those decisions seem so easy, but when you're just swiping a card, it's really hard to see the big picture of your spending. And that's why I'm such a firm believer in the cash envelope system.
Yeah, we're so disconnected because I have the Amazon app, I have the DoorDash app, I have the debit cards, and like, I can't say I really feel much when I'm just pushing buttons, and I hate to admit that, but you're
Or
just
Apple
so
Pay, and you
yeah,
just, like,
you're
put your
so
phone
far
up to
removed
it.
from your spending. And yeah, I remember when I was younger, and after your birthday party, you would be handed like you got like $15 or $20, and you had to like go to the mall and figure out like where you could spend it. And I think that's when it's more okay, like I'm going to prioritize how I spend this money because it's only this much in my hands. So if it's a couple, so for my husband and I, there's just two envelopes for how do you kind of split up the envelopes and make it so it's collaborative?
So here's the thing, and that's one of the number one questions I get is how do I make the cash envelope method work with a spouse or partner? And the number one thing the wives tell me is my husband hates being told how much he can spend. He hates being given a cash
My
allowance.
husband would love it.
Oh, really?
I really think he would.
I wouldn't love it.
Yeah. My audience, 98% of my followers are women. And so my brand and the cash envelopes, everything that I do is very feminine, right? And so my reader is saying, my husband doesn't want to carry your floral envelope in his back pocket. So what I recommend is you can do it, one, before anything, you need to sit down and talk about the cash envelope method with your spouse and how it's going to work for you. Are they okay being handed a cash allowance? That's the first question because it's going to dictate how you handle it, the method. If they're not okay being handed by wife a cash amount, I suggest leaving their spending money in a checking account. Let them swipe their card all day long if that's what they want to do. And then you track the spending, right? You're the one who tracks the spending. Or if you're working on it together, he can track spending as well. So that's the first option, leaving his monthly spending in the checking account, let him go at it. The second thing is you have to figure out who is the spender in your household. Are you, as the mom and the wife, going to the grocery store most often, and it's only the husband goes to the store when you call him and say, hey, honey, can you grab some milk, right? So then I would say 90% of your food budget cash goes with you. The other 10% goes with the husband. And not only that, with the cash envelope method, I always suggest you don't carry your envelopes, all of your cash with you at all times. You only take the money that you need for that day, which means planning ahead. If that's the case, maybe you don't need the food envelope, right? And it's sitting at home. Husband can then have access to it when you're not using it.
I love
so
it.
That's kind of the thing.
See, it's different though, because in my house, like I handle most of the financial stuff in our house. So, because my wife is, proven herself not able to do that.
Well, my husband and I are both creatives, and because I'm the one home, I'm the one that deals with pretty much all of the bills and stuff and all of the shopping and everything. We had the Mint app for a while, and you'd get an alert if you'd go over on certain categories, and the coffee category was a huge source of shame for both of us. Like whoever would get the alert first, and it was the other person, it would be like a huge like hazing thing. But I think that I really think this would go very well at my home. Like, you don't think it would?
No, I think I'm sure it would work.
Yeah.
I mean, I just have a lot of shuffling to figure out in order to do it.
It's just a definite make sure that conversation and consistent conversation about the budgeting and finances happens. Like I always say, at least once a month. If you can even do it once a week, sit down with your partner and spouse and see if you're both on the same page, because let's be honest, this is what causes a lot of tension in relationships, especially marriages. And the ability to communicate openly about your feelings, like, hey, I really don't like it when you tell me I can only spend $100 this month. Okay, well then what's amount that you're comfortable with? Where can we get on the same page? The conversation part of it is so important when you're working with the cash envelope method or any budgeting method.
I think one of the biggest hurdles, and we've talked about in previous episodes when it comes to, planning to buy a home, even, for example, a lot of the younger demographic we've talked about carries such a student loan debt these days that, historically people didn't really have. A How do you recommend people try to attack that? Or is there a way that you recommend people go about trying to get rid of that sooner than later?
Yes. So student loans, I got done paying off my last student loan back in November of last year. And one of the things that I kind of see with my readers especially is they can have student loans for 10 years. And by the end of that 10 years, they still don't know what kind of student loans they have. So are they subsidized? Are they unsubsidized? When is the interest accruing? What is the interest rate? And so I think the number one thing with student loans is sitting down and figuring exactly what you have. That's the first step, because you can't create a plan to pay it off until you know those things. So for me, believe it or not, I had 18 student loans. Okay, they totaled about $33,000, but it was 18 separate, completely different loans. And some of them were unsubsidized, some of them were subsidized, meaning that the interest can accrue when you get out of school or they can accrue when you actually take out the loan. And a lot of people don't know this. And a lot of people also don't know their interest rates. And so I say sit down, piece of paper in front of you, write down everything about your student loans that you know. If that means you have to call the loan company, if that means looking at a statement, get that down in front of you and then figure out a plan to pay it off. Are you going to pay it off with the interest rates that are the highest first? Are you going to tackle the balances that are smallest first? You have to have a step-by-step debt payoff plan, I feel, to really tackle it and stay dedicated to it, rather than just saying, I'm going to throw all my extra dollars to this debt and to this debt. Focus on one debt at a time while you make the minimum payments on your other debts, and then just create that plan to pay it off.
So in terms of financial planners, I definitely feel that I would be a candidate for one. And you recommend, working with financial planners. A lot of people would probably say, well, I have no money to pay for a financial planner because I'm struggling with money. How affordable are they, and kind of like how does it work? Is it typically like an hourly rate, or how do financial planners work?
So here's the thing. There are many different financial professionals. So you have financial advisors, investment advisors, and certified financial planners, which are known as CFPs. And then you have people like me who are an AFC, which is an accredited financial counselor. People like me, now if you're struggling and you say, I really don't have the money to go out and get the help I need, look at counselors, because most of the time they are in nonprofit organizations that actually won't charge you a dime for their service.
Wow.
A lot of banks also have financial resources that doesn't cost you a dime to go in and get the knowledge that you need and the confidence you need to feel like you need to move forward or make a decision. In fact, more and more credit unions and banks are bringing in financial counselors and people who are educated in the personal finance realm, and they don't charge you a dime. And so afcpe.org is where you can actually click on find a financial counselor, and you can literally find one in every state or where you live, and it's absolutely free.
So if you had, let's say, just kind of wrapping things up a little bit, if you had 5 tips maybe to recommend to the audience that would say, that would be helpful for setting a budget and sticking with it, what do you think those tips would be?
So tip number 1 is discovering your why. And people always tell me all the time, well, I want to start budgeting. And I said, well, why do you want to start budgeting? And they start listing out all these things. But here's the thing. It took me, when my son was born, it was like automatic. I knew my why, I knew my purpose. But before that, I felt like I was kind of floating around, right? I didn't really have a purpose. So discovering that why, and your why should be something that you're so passionate about, you get emotional thinking about it or talking about it. That's how important your why should be. So discovering your why, that's what's going to keep you dedicated and motivated on your financial journey. Tip number 2 is track your spending right now, today. If you're wondering what's the number 1 action step to take from this podcast, right now, today, start tracking your spending. It doesn't have to be pretty. get a notebook, piece of paper out, and just start writing down the dollars that you're spending. The next one is figuring out and looking at your recurring bills. So you may think right now that you have to spend this much money on your bills. That would be lying to yourself. You can decrease the bills that you have in many different ways. You just have to take action and put in the work to do so. So decreasing the bills that you feel like you have to spend money on every single month. The next tip I would say would be, if you're dealing with debt, to sit down and write. It's scary and it sucks. And I hated every bit of it. I didn't want to look at the big picture of my debt, but getting it down in front of your face, writing everything you know about your debt is the first step in being able to tackle it. So those would be the main tips, I think, with being able, and not only that, figure out what kind of learner you are. Are you a visual learner? Do you learn by analyzing numbers? What kind of learner are you? Because that's really how you have to set up your budget and organize your finances in order to stay motivated. Now, I'm a visual learner, which is why on my Instagram you see all these pretty things, right, and all these visuals, because that's what keeps me motivated. So I also think figuring out what would keep you motivated as a learner in the very beginning.
Amazing.
Thank you so much for being here. I mean, I think you've shared some really insightful, like a lot of information, obviously. But for people who want to find out more about, your financial method or, more budgeting tips and stuff, where can people find the Budget Mom?
Yeah, so the meat and bones of the Budget Mom lives on Instagram, and you can just find me on the Budget Mom, at the Budget Mom. Daily videos, tutorials, my day-to-day spending, everything is right there, as well as my website, thebudgetmom.com. That's also where you can find my free email course. It's absolutely free. It comes with over 20 printables and over 20 cash envelope designs. Everything's free to get you started on a cash envelope budget. And then as well as my YouTube at The Budget Mom, where I put more of my lengthy, in detail videos live on YouTube.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm like, I got so much to work on. I'm gonna have to decompress after this episode, but we'll figure it out.
Lunch is canceled.
That's right.
Coffee's canceled.
I'm getting my wife on the phone, and we're gonna sort this out.
Take your floral envelope to
That's
Home
right.
Depot.
I'm gonna take my floral envelope to Home Depot, and I'm gonna get shopping. We want to also thank our founding sponsor, FilterBuy, for making this series possible, and encourage you guys to follow us on social media at howtohome_guide and get involved in the show. We respond to messages and comments all the time, and we're constantly posting content. So be sure to follow us. Anything else?
No, that's it.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for watching, listening, and make sure you rate us on your podcast listening app of choice. And we'll see you guys next time.